Good evening, I'm Ces Orenia Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
The big stories tonight. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court finds unconstitutional the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte. But the High Tribunal was quick to say this does not mean they are absolving the VP of high crimes she's accused of.
That decision from the SC comes 3 days before the 20th Congress formally opens and President Bongbong Marcos delivers his fourth State of the Nation address. The SONA will be a much simpler occasion this year in light of recent calamities.
And it will be a rainy SONA Monday. Pag-asa is seeing bad weather to persist even beyond July 28, with storms and the southwest monsoon or habagat still hovering.
The impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte is dead for now. And at least that's from the point of view of the Supreme Court. Duterte scored a major legal victory today after the High Court struck down the impeachment complaint against her, ruling it unconstitutional. The decision was based on the grounds of due process. The SC cited Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 5 of the Constitution, which prohibits the filing of more than one impeachment complaint against the same official within a one-year period. The decision in part reads, the House impeachment complaint versus VP Sara Duterte is barred by the one-year rule and that due process or fairness applies in all stages of the impeachment process. The ruling goes on our fundamental law is clear. The end does not justify the means. There is a right way to do the right things at the right time. This is what fairness or due process of law means, even for impeachment.
But the Supreme Court was also quick to clarify that the court is not absolving Vice President Duterte from any of the charges against her, and that any subsequent impeachment complaints may only be filed starting February 6 of 2026. Recall that the 3 impeachment complaints were filed against Duterte at the House of Representatives back in December of 2024. A 4th complaint signed by 215 congressmen and was endorsed to the Senate in February 2025. However, the Supreme Court said the first 3 complaints were already covered by the one-year bar rule and no new impeachment complaint may be filed this year. This made that 4th impeachment complaint invalid. Duterte is accused of high crimes, which include misusing public funds, amassing unusual wealth, and threatening to kill President Bongbong Marcos, his wife Liza, and his cousin, Speaker Martin Romualdez.
Reactions to the Supreme Court ruling were swift. Akbayan Party List Representative Percy Sendanya did not mince words, saying the High Tribunal has reduced itself as a supreme coddler of the Vice President. The dismissal, Sendanya claims, has set a dangerous precedent. The lawmaker believes corrupt politicians may now escape accountability by hiding behind the Supreme Court. For his part, Senator Tito Soto said he would rather hear what the House of Representatives has to say. He added that he will be studying all a legal luminaries' advice that the Senate can disregard the SC's decision. For Senator Amy Marcos, the Supreme Court's decision should just be honored and respected. She likewise asked her fellow senators to go back to work, put the interests of the nation and the people first, and to refrain from politicking. Meantime, incoming Senator Bam Aquino maintains that the impeachment trial should continue. Aquino said, as a co-equal branch, the Senate's mandate under the Constitution on the impeachment process is clear and should be respected. Aquino also called on fellow senators to a caucus to discuss the SC decision. Senator Aquino's cousin, Tindig Pilipinas co-convener Kiko Aquino D, says the impeachment process against the vice president should continue. D's group was one of the impeachment complainants.
Why do we feel this urgent to impeach the Vice President? Kagaya ng pinapakita niyo po footage ngayon, no? So we were all there nung nag-press con siya noong November na nagbaba siya ng grave threats. And ako, I'll be honest, no? Wala akong pagmamahal kay President Marcos. And in fact, when she said those things at first, medyo natuwa pa ako. Alam mo yun, buy one, take one. Ayoko naman si VP Sara. Ayoko si Bongbong Marcos. Kung may mangyari kay VP Sara, we also get Bongbong Marcos funny. But as a Filipino citizen, I had to stop and think, what kind of a country has a vice president that makes grave threats like this? What kind of country has a vice president or any kind of public official that brags about hiring an assassin?
Ito na nga, no? Absent of the publishing of the actual decision, a lot of people are holding muna, talking about legal luminaries here. We were trying to get some
Is
of
that
them
why
on the
we're
line.
left to discuss this on our own? Okay.
I guess.
The Senate can actually, Senator Bam Aquino's statement is curious and intriguing because he's saying the Senate could go ahead.
Which
Right?
is supported by Senator Tito Soto. He pretty much said the same thing, even name dropping, although blind item, no, a legal luminary who supposedly said told him that the Senate can ignore the SC decision.
Because it already, didn't you point out earlier when we were discussing this before the show, Pawi, that the Senate has already constituted
Constituted
itself as an impeachment court.
I mean, they already took their oaths, right?
Yeah.
So it begs the question, is jurisdiction still questionable at this point? What happens, right? Is it retroactive, like it becomes null and void? But the Supreme Court did point out that the first 3 complaints kasi were archived and therefore dismissed. So some legal luminaries are also questioning, or though some of the netizens I'm seeing, right, lawyers, why didn't they just consolidate the first 3? Instead of coming up with a 4th.
What they're saying, what the House said at that time, back in February when they came out with the 4th, remember Sec. Gen. Velasco was even saying, hinahold pa kasi meron pa daw parating. And supposedly, the 3 impeachment complaints, yung consolidation nun is the 4th complaint.
That's what I remember.
But then they also failed to disclose, di ba, which committee drafted it. They told the Supreme Court internally.
Usually, these complaints are referred to the Justice Committee.
Correct.
But what happened was this 4th complaint, because 1/3 of the House voted in favor of it, that process was not done.
Correct.
Because it's
Yeah.
another option, right?
It's
It's another option, though.
It's like the express
Correct.
lane or
And
the
you know,
service road.
Remember, we've been asking this.
Yes.
Isn't that a flaw? We were asking.
Yes, and
then
there's
they-
no answer.
Yeah.
There's no convincing answer.
Well, they did say the House has the leeway because it's their rules, so they can skirt it.
But yun nga, put yourself in the position of the citizen who filed the impeachment complaint
True.
1, 2, 3, and then tinabi lang siya, di ba? Tinabi lang
Pwede
siya.
rin.
So ako parang as a citizen, yun yung concern ko. Like, so pwede ako mag-file. Babayad ako ng abogado para
Tama.
mag-draft para sa
Tapos
akin.
hindi pinansin.
Oo.
Oo.
Diba?
Hindi man lang linagay sa order of business
Correct. And that's also what the Supreme Court says. Bakit may discretion ba yung Sec. Gen. tsaka yung House Speaker na
Yeah.
hindi siya ilagay
To ignore.
to ignore?
Basically, they were ignored.
Right.
To drag their feet,
Yeah.
and not act on it.
Yeah.
But SC spokesperson Camille Ting did mention earlier that they could possibly, the legal recourse now is they can file for a motion for reconsideration. They can appeal
They
it,
can,
right?
or
Next
file
year.
next year.
Yeah, February 6th.
But also, the reason why you don't just accept a complaint is because it can be used to inoculate that official from a strong complaint.
Correct.
Meaning it could be weak, and then you're already protected for a year.
Yes. And that's what
So-
the 1-year bar rule, yan yung whole point, di ba?
Yeah.
To make sure that doesn't happen. But now we see that it can be used as a, to weaponize it, quote
Also.
unquote. As people are saying now, hide behind the Supreme Court. There's also been some points made about, does this new ruling by the Supreme Court negate or amend the Francisco ruling na non-stop natin
Yun na nga
pinag-uusapan
eh.
since.
But it's also curious because the arguments raised by the Supreme Court were never really taken up thoroughly. Remember,
Correct,
we would
yeah.
tackle should the Senate act forthwith,
Yeah.
et cetera, all these issues.
Pwede bang tumawid?
Pero itong hindi pag-calendar was not really tackled
The
as
focus
much.
wasn't there.
Yes,
Yes.
right? So now
Blindsided.
yeah.
We were
Also the timing, no?
timing
Yeah.
3 days before the 20th Congress opens. We do know SONA is already on Monday. But then again, no, there's always 2 sides to everything. For the camp of Vice President Sara, of course, this is a huge victory. On the other side, marami ring, of course, complaining. But the question is, who will be the final arbiter? Because co-equal branches of government, right?
Correct.
Judicial, executive, legislative.
Yun nga. Well,
So what
pinoint out naman ng Supreme Court na, we're only, kumbaga, commenting on the constitutional provisions of this whole process because nga it's very, very political. Tingin mo, Sas. Ang hirap
Naku.
magsalita.
Oo nga,
no?
ang hirap
Sobrang
eh.
hirap talaga.
We would really love to hear from the prosecution panel and the House
And the
leadership.
Actually, everyone eh. Siguro
But-
yung Senate yung least interesting to call right now.
But
They're
the-
like, whew.
But the fact that the Supreme Court asked all these questions of the prosecution panel before this decision was already a sign that they were tilting toward
The Senate POV.
yes.
Diba? If you want to put it that way.
or the VP's,
The VP's
point of view. Yeah. Right?
Yun nga eh. So I guess,
Well-
nabaliwala nga ba yung nagyari nung June 10, wearing the robes and taking their oaths, diba? Because I think this decision, going back to what you were saying earlier, Pawi, I think this decision says na hindi talaga valid yung fourth complaint and therefore hindi siya dapat umabot doon sa Senate to begin with.
Kung mag-move si Senator Bato,
Kung mag-move pa siya.
meron na siyang i-move na bago. This decision, di ba?
Napanindigan ng lahat ng mga senators.
Yes. It,
So baka
although, and then we can predict that Senator Bam or Senator Tito Soto will challenge him.
That's true. And then, pero gusto ko pa rin makita, remember
Pero
the
August
last
4 pa yun eh. August 3 ba?
August 4 daw,
4.
Monday. Remember sabi ni Attorney Tonggol sa atin the last time, yung malamang magyayari is unahan sa
Yeah,
podium. Parang
oo.
excited ako for that moment. I don't know whether it will still happen or not. Kasi I
Yeah.
guess now, nasa Senado naman no, yung disagreements.
I'm curious also because if this just does this all unfolds on February 6 after the one-year bar rule, right? Will it still carry the same weight? Will it lose steam? Kasi
Yes.
Pero may nakita
what's the
akong-
dynamic like?
I saw an
next?
interesting comment online about that from my friend who's also a lawyer. Ang sabi niya, itong ginawa na ito, looking at it politically, because kinancel na nga, but it will keep, the hearings will keep going. There's possible na magkaroon sila na isa pang case. Therefore, the attention on this case or on these charges will not go away until February 6, 2026.
But I think it will lose a little
Steam. O yun nga eh, kasi Malacanang din has
They
said,
refer to the Supreme Court as the gods of Padre Faura. You know,
gods have
and they have spoken.
on a Friday afternoon, no less.
Yes. So, well, on the line now, to weigh in on this development is Attorney Jesus Falsis. Good evening to you, Attorney.
Pa-unmute po.
Good evening po. Good evening to everyone.
So, Attorney, what do you make of the unanimous Supreme Court decision?
Of course, it's shocking to many liberals and progressives who are hoping for the impeachment trial to continue because the trial is supposed to represent accountability. So we all know the Constitution says public office is public trust, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum. A trial is best for everyone because the trial will allow everyone to present their evidence for or against the allegations against Vice President Sara Duterte.
But
Siya
let's go to the decision of the Supreme Court, the
Yes.
procedure. They say that it was flawed.
Yeah. So the Supreme Court just uploaded the decision kanina mga 1 hour ago. No? So I was lucky enough to read it before you called. And I was just about to post my opinion about it. No? So on the 1-year bar, so let's be clear first. No? And this is something first-year law students are taught. First year pa lang alam na nila yan. No? So ang 1-year bar is not about the complaint. Baka akala ng mga tao, the first impeachment complaint filed will trigger the 1-year ban. Hindi. It is an impeachment proceeding. The Constitution says there's a 1-year ban on impeachment proceedings, meaning it is not about the complaint per se. So let's go to the complaint yung issue. No? So meron tayong 4 complaints. The first 3 complaints filed by civil society groups. The first one endorsed by Akbayan. The fourth one was more or less, I can admit to this naman, no, it was machinated or orchestrated by the House itself, the leadership, and maybe those who are politically opposed to Sara Duterte. That's the fourth impeachment complaint. Let's call that the Speaker Martin Romualdez complaint. No?
Okay.
So the first three complaints are by civil society groups. The very first one was filed before the House on December 2, 2025. That was endorsed by Akbayan and filed by the civil society groups. Bakit natin tinitingnan yung December 2? Hindi yan yung date na nagtitrigger ng one-year ban pa. Because the Supreme Court says and the Constitution has said na the complaint must be filed and referred. So dalawa ang kailangang mangyari before the initiation of the proceedings is triggered and the one-year ban applies. So the Supreme Court decision, luckily I read it before you called, no? Justice Leonen is the ponente, he's the writer of the main decision. And nasa decision niya mismo, no, page 64. Page 64 of the decision, he says that the House of Representatives actually complied with the 10-day session rule. So ano ba yung 10-day session rule, no? From the moment of filing of the complaint by Akbayan and the civil society groups or the people behind it, that complaint must be referred to that must be included in the order of business of the House of Representatives within 10 session days. Ngayon, let's clarify, ang 10 session days is not calendar days. Calendar days is parang tayo sa bangko, sa work, next day, tomorrow, that's one calendar day. Ang session day can actually last for 3 to 5 days per session. No? It depends on the rules of the House and the calendar of session days of the House. So nag-present ang House in its reply. Nung nag-file ng answer ang House of Representatives to the petition to dismiss because of one-year ban rule, no, ang House nagbigay ng evidence na it did comply with the 10 session days. So when was the first three impeachment complaints referred to the or included in the order of business? From December 2, of course mukhang malayo, no, kasi nga again calendar days ang tinitingnan. But it was included in the order of business February 5. February 5, 2025, that was the 10th session day. And page 64, the decision of the Supreme Court written by Justice Leonen admits na the first impeachment complaint up until the third, no, wag muna natin pag-usapan yung fourth, was indeed included in the order of business on February 5. Now, what else happened on February 5? February 5 was also the same day that the fourth, yung pang-apat, the Speaker Martin Romualdez complaint was filed and signed and endorsed by one-third members of the House. Ang weird and ang concern ko sa Supreme Court decision, even most academics who would read it, no, kahit first-year law students, merong logical jump or there is a weird and forced conclusion in page 64 and page 68 and other pages relating to this issue, no, na when the first impeachment complaint up until the third was included in the order of business on February 5 and it was not acted upon, nung nag-adjourn na daw yung session, kasi we should remember February 5 is the last day of adjournment, nag-election na, nangangampanya na yung mga congressman, no? When it was not acted upon daw nung February 5, the first three, it was an effective dismissal. Meaning, by consideration, by conclusion ng Supreme Court, walang any other factual basis or invocation of the rules. It was just the Supreme Court that said effectively, when it was not acted upon, the first three were dismissed, thus triggering the one-year ban rule. That's the logic and that's the decision for the Supreme Court, no, and those who support the triggering of the one-year ban. But I have to give my caveat there agad. Because the same day, there was a fourth impeachment complaint. The Supreme Court, specifically the ponente, no, Justice Leonen, should have taken into account na why would they put malice or why would they think that the House acted negligently or willfully did not act on the first three impeachment complaints just for the purpose of, let's say, avoiding the one-year ban, when there was a fourth impeachment complaint that was endorsed and signed by one-third members of the House. And this is a different species, different creature, no, from a normal complaint filed by citizens endorsed by, let's say, 1 or 2 congressmen. Pag 1/3 of the House ang nag-sign and endorse ng impeachment complaint, let's look at the Constitution. The Constitution says by operation of law. Si Constitution nagsasabi hindi si Supreme Court, hindi ang House, hindi ang Senate, automatically the complaint signed and endorsed by 1/3 members of the House becomes the articles of impeachment. So wala nang ibang procedure kailangan. Basta nakapil.
But attorney, should that not have been referred to the order? Dapat ba nalagay sa order of business yon before the voting?
Ang sinasabi ng Supreme Court, that should be included as well in the order of business, nagbigay ng due process. So the other grounds for the 1-year ban rule in terms of how the Supreme Court analyze it is because may due process considerations daw. Meaning the respondent, the vice president, or kung sino man yung ini-impeach sa lower house, must be given due process to also present their evidence or rebut whatever is being presented as allegations sa magiging articles of impeachment or dun sa complaint. Now, this is where I totally differ with the Supreme Court because, and the Supreme Court is the one that is in variance with a lot of academic perspectives on the Constitution. No? Ang sinasabi, so just to be clear, ito ang perspective ng Supreme Court para maging fair ako. Ang sinasabi ng Supreme Court, even the impeachment proceeding in the House by initiating a complaint, no, the filing, the referral, and kahit yung 1/3, pag sinign or in-endorse ng representatives, must contain due process. However, let's qualify kasi hindi qualify sobra ng Supreme Court yung due process na sinasabi niya. Ang due process that the Supreme Court was talking about is adversarial. There is no just one type of due process. No, even around the world, you can see this other type. The other type is called inquisitorial due process. No? So one hand, we have adversarial. Second, we have inquisitorial. Ano yung adversarial? Yun yung alam ng nakakaramihan. No? Sa courts, sa trial, there's an adversarial due process there because you have the prosecutor, you have the defense or the private defense lawyer of the criminal accused. Magpapalitan sila ng ebidensya, magre-rebut, magka-counter, magko-cross-examine, and it's the judge who will decide sino mas nakakapaniwala. That's adversarial. Ano yung inquisitorial, no? So there are other jurisdictions in the world that follow an inquisitorial due process when it comes to filing of cases. Wag muna natin pag-usapan yung impeachment. Pag nagpa-file ng cases, ang inquisitorial due process, ang gagawin niya, may inquisitor, usually like a state attorney general, who would invite many resource persons or subpoena people and ask them, talagang gather information, inquisitorial, mag-i-inquire. So what is the relevance here sa Constitution? If you look at the design of Article 11, dividing the power to initiate impeachment sa House, nilagay sole power, and sole power to try cases of impeachment sa Senate, makikita natin na the adversarial due process that the Supreme Court wanted the House to follow is not given with the House. It is given with the Senate. Yung adversarial process na makapag-rebut, makapag-answer, si Vice President Sara Duterte should be in the trial. Now, can the House afford an adversarial due process? Yes, it can if it wanted to. But the species nga na 1/3, pag final and sinign and endorse na yung 1/3, wala na diyang adversarial due process. Ang nangyayari dyan, inquisitorial due process, which is by fact-finding and determination of the representatives which represent the vote of the people, the will of the people on a local level. Pag sila nag-inquire na, okay, sa akin, may basis to charge a case against a certain impeachable official and refer it to the Senate for trial, that is inquisitorial due process. So with all due respect to the Supreme Court, when they invoke due process, I don't really think there was a disregard of due process sa House of Representatives because the concept of due process is multidimensional. Nasa Senate yung gusto ng Supreme Court, which is adversarial. And eto before you have questions, so you remember the order of the Supreme Court asking a lot of factual questions sa House, whether or not they read it, whether or not they circulated it properly with all the attachments attached, etc. And Justice Carpio and I think Congressman De Lima, they said no, that was judicial overreach because, for example, you don't ask the Supreme Court justices if they read the decisions that they signed their names on. So sabi ni Justice Carpio, it's courtesy and separation of powers na if the congressmen sign and endorse an impeachment complaint, you don't really ask na, did you read it? Did you check the evidence? How much time did you have to do that? No? What am I pointing out here? If you look at the Supreme Court decision na prohibiting the impeachment trial from continuing, it said it imposed a lot of other procedural nitty-gritties on the House, which is a form of judicial overreach. Parang mina-micromanage na ng Supreme Court how the House of Representatives should initiate an impeachment case, which the Constitution said sole power to initiate is with the House. Now, of course, again, the Supreme Court can check all government agencies kung may grave abuse of discretion. Pero that is why merong separation of powers na ina-outline ng Constitution, eto sa'yo. Kapag klaro na ang isang power ay nasa isang chamber or nasa isang branch, there should be judicial restraint and there should be judicial humility na wag natin pakialaman kasi ang dami nating ini-impose, sila naman ang may power to impose or regulate their own rules and guidelines. So, with all due respect to the Supreme Court, madami silang nilagay sa Constitution. In effect, inamend nila yung Constitution. Walang sinabing procedure yung Constitution, pero sabi ng Supreme Court, hindi, kailangan idagdag ito.
Okay.
All right. Well, we thank you for your lengthy explanation and salamat po na nabasa nyo na yung decision and you had to comment. But pwede ba yung EMR kasi unanimous na yung decision?
I don't think it's advisable to move for reconsideration kasi very unlikely na given the voting na wala man lang dissent. Although we have to note si Justice Kagiwa was inhibited, no? Hindi siya nag take part in the decision, no? But if the decision is unanimous, it's unlikely they will reverse it. So actually, this is not from a legal angle anymore. Politically, it will all depend now on the Senate because there are already senators who said they might vote to still continue the trial despite the Supreme Court decision. As a lawyer, of course, there are many perspectives on that and I don't really advise pushing the country into a constitutional crisis, but it is within the Supreme Court's power, I think, to with the sole power to try all cases if they do decide to continue. Ang question kasi dyan politically, no, false sign na to, hindi na to law. Ang tanong, what can the Supreme Court do if the Senate decides to continue? That's the question.
All right. Well, we thank you so much for both your legal and political insights, Attorney Jesus Falsis.
We're going to be taking a quick break for now, but coming up next, Malacanang and Congress wants the President's fourth State of the Nation address on Monday to go on without the usual pomp and pageantry. That and more reaction to the Supreme Court's decision to keep the impeachment trial of Vice President Sara Duterte from proceeding. When we return, keep it here on One News.
Welcome back to the big story. It's all systems go for the fourth State of the Nation address of President Bongbong Marcos on Monday, July 28th. Because of the recent calamities, Batasang Pambansa issued a new protocol toning down the extravagance of the occasion. There will be no more red carpet at the entrance of the North and South lobbies, where visitors usually enter and grant interviews. There will still be red carpets, though, at the rear entrance where Marcos himself is supposed to come in, and at the main entrance towards the plenary hall. Attendees are still encouraged to wear traditional but simple barong and Filipiniana.
Wala nang stage ceremonies, no fashion coverage, no photo setups po doon sa red carpet area dati na usual na nakikita pag panahon ng SONA. Pwede pa rin naman yung mga brief at impromptu interviews, pero hindi na po ito para po sa pagpapakita ng mga magagarang kasuutan, kundi ito po ay para isang formal na pagtitipon para makinig tayo sa State of the Nation address ng ating Pangulo.
Meanwhile, Makabayan's activist arm is also preparing for protests come SONA Day. They already have an effigy ready for burning, which they called Bongbong Mambubudol. But if it rains on Monday, they will destroy it instead. ACT Teachers Party List Representative Antonio Tino and Kabataan Party List Representative Rene Co will join the protests.
Well, bagsak dahil sa pag-upo niya, sabi niya bababa ng 20 pesos ang bigas. Alam naman natin yung 20 pesos na available, selected lamang yan. At para sa mayorya ng mga Pilipino, napakataas ng presyo ng bilihin, pagkain, kuryente, tubig at iba pa.
Grade of 5. No, hindi pa rin natutugunan ang widespread hunger, hindi natutugunan ang mga pangailangan para sa edukasyon, kalusugan at iba pa. Unahin niya ang mga pangailangan natin, hindi yung kanyang side trips to the United States at iba pang mga bansa.
Now, as the nation awaits the President's fourth State of the Nation address, what should we expect? Political analyst Robin Garcia joins us now to weigh in. Good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. Good evening, ladies. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me.
Robin, let's first get your thoughts on the Supreme Court's ruling on the articles of impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte. The timing is unusual?
The timing is unusual. Actually, it is, I mean, for an institution such as the Supreme Court, with a lot of Duterte appointees, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around more than 10, around 12 Duterte appointees. The timing is a big blow to President Bongbong Marcos's already perceived weakness, no? And there are a lot of attacks towards factors that affect the favorability of Bongbong Marcos and his legitimacy. And this is one of the things that really I would consider a blow to the level of legitimacy and support for President Bongbong Marcos's leadership.
Right, but President Marcos has been always saying that he is not actually in favor of this impeachment. So wouldn't it be conversely seen as, a win for him?
Well, I mean, in that sense, right. He is not necessarily. But I think there's this big perception already, an understanding that because of the rift between the two families, that he's somehow involved in this. No, maybe not in a formal way, but maybe in an informal political way. I think it does reflect on him, and a lot of people, I think, will it definitely sees it as another loss for Bongbong Marcos. I know I do see it in that way.
Well, Robin, earlier we had Attorney Falsis, and he said that even if this decision was to be appealed by the House, it is unlikely that the justices will reverse their decision. So if the House of Representatives does file another impeachment complaint on February 6, 2026 instead, do you think it will lose steam by then? Dynamics will change?
Well, definitely the political dynamics by next year will change, and we're closer then to the presidential elections, no, of 2028. And you know that the filing of candidacy is almost a year before, no, that's in 2027. And if you're running for the presidency, you need to be creating coalitions much earlier than that, no? So that's next year, so late next year. And therefore, what's the political calculations of people who may oppose or support the impeachment will be different than as it is currently. So this delaying tactic is really bad for the proponents of the impeachment. But hold on, because there's still some talk that actually the Senate, may ignore and choose to convene as as an impeachment court and continue the discussions regarding the impeachment of Vice President Sara Duterte. So I think that's a moving target, and it's unfolding as we speak. And therefore, we for people who are in favor of the impeachment, there's still some hope that it could actually push through in the next few days.
Wouldn't us being in a constitutional crisis be a bit more, messier
Well,
than the situation we're already in?
Definitely, you'll definitely see all the branches of government at play, and there's in political science, there's a model called bureaucratic politics. So all of the institutions are fighting each other, and that's something that we might see really live and at play once the Senate defies the Supreme Court decision that just came out this afternoon. Whatever the case, it's going to be a very exciting next week, in the next few days.
What are you expecting from the President's State of the Nation address? Last year, he, banned pogos. It was a very bold announcement that he made. How will he attract the attention or the exactly the imagination of the population?
That's State of the Nation addresses are always a perception because it's such a nationwide, very publicized event. So it's always they speak to their allies, they speak to their opponents inside government, but they also speak to the citizens, and to the mass public. And therefore, it is a way to project strength towards members of government and important stakeholders. But it's also a perception shaping opportunity for Bongbong to make sure that his legitimacy, as I said, is strengthened, in the next for the next 3 years. It's an opportunity for him to fuel the next 3 years of his administration and to increase his favorability. And we know, from the data that his favorability has really suffered, especially the past few months. And we know that the favorability
Why do
of the
you
Vice
refer to
President
it?
and other.
Sorry to interrupt, Robin, but
Sure.
you refer to it as legitimacy.
Correct.
Why do you use that particular word?
I use it, political legitimacy, because it's sort of the word that we use, as a to mean the level of support for a regime, for policies, and for the person and for the ideas that he represents. So instead of just trust or instead of just satisfaction, so we use a more encompassing term such as legitimacy. So it's basically the level of political support for the president. But yeah, so it's really an opportunity for Bongbong in light of the many evidence of his parang declining support. We know that his level of trust is just around, little around 30%. It's quite low compared with the others, the other candidates and the other people who in this administration or in this current regime that are being supported. And of course, this is the first State of the Nation address after the midterm elections, which we know, really expose the limitations of the level of support for Bongbong Marcos and his administration.
So having said that, Robin, what do you expect him to put or to highlight in his SONA? Because he just came from that US trip, and a lot of pundits are not satisfied with that 1 percentage point discount that he got on our tariffs. Bumabagyo, hinahanap yung flood control na 5,500 projects, which was the highlight of a couple of SONAs ago. some are saying they want to hear something decisive from the president about online gaming or online gambling. Do you think that's going to make it into his speech on Monday?
So I think he will be talking about foreign policy. He will be talking about the achievements of pivoting to the United States. He will be talking about the problem of partnering with China. So parang that's usually a tactic of heads of states to create this enemy, no? And that enemy in this case is China. And to justify also his decision to tie our foreign policy sort of fate to the United States. And I expect him to defend that 1% decrease in our tariffs, no? And I expect him to talk about how that is in fact lower than the other tariff rates that are being imposed on other countries. And I do expect him to not just to go beyond foreign policy, but to talk about GDP. Actually, the GDP is at a modest 5%, but then he will have to tie that back to inflation and why he's not able to address inflation yet, especially with commodities and staples. We know that there are issues with education. I don't know if he's going to be defensive in light of the budget that was slashed out of education, but we know that that is a very, very important issue for Filipinos. And then there might also be an opportunity to talk about peace and order, no? Especially with the business community and drugs and all of these things. Yeah, so these are the things that I think Bongbong might talk about on Monday.
Well, Robin, we are approaching the last 3 years of Marcos Jr.'s administration. What do you think he should focus on in these last 3 years? And in your opinion, is it already clear what his legacy is? Because every president does have a legacy after their administration.
So there are persistent problems, and those persistent problems are, a lot of it is economic, a lot of it is are things that people feel. A lot of it really affect the poorest of the poor. No? So I hope he does have a program to address that. But I also hope that he sort of uses this as an opportunity to really substantiate what Bagong Pilipinas is. No? It is a political slogan that they introduced, but I don't think there's any strong substantiation of what it is, aside from a couple of logos and a couple of songs, right? So we definitely need to see how he will substantiate, how that will roll out in the next few years, no? And I do hope he does take the opportunity to talk about that.
Okay, and this call, no, na maging austerity call for Monday, no red carpet, no big fashion. That's not the first time this call has been made. Do you think lawmakers will follow?
Parang nagpagawa na ng mga
exactly, nagpagawa.
magandang
Designers.
outfits.
Yeah, well, it's completely unnecessary to me, I think. But we all know that the SONA is there's a lot of pomp there. No, it's an opportunity to showcase how they look. But yeah, we definitely, it's a good move not to be tone deaf in light of the typhoon and everything that's being experienced by the Filipinos across Metro Manila and other places. So that's a good move, but whether they will succeed, I don't know.
Okay. Gusto ko lang balikan, Robin, very quickly yung sinabi mo about the budget because the 2025 budget was such a big issue and some would argue na this is that's why midterm results for BBM weren't so great for the Alyansa. What exactly do you want to hear? Like open by cam? That's kind of the most matunog so far, at least online.
The budget process is such a complicated and complex, and we really need to unpack the black box, especially with the reports that there are a lot of insertions, no? So I know that the president has intervened, especially for things such as education, no? Binalik yung ibang mga budget na tinanggal. But yeah, I think people would expect more answers about the decrease in budget for certain places, not just education, but in other policy areas also. Yeah, and it does talk about how much control he has of the Senate and the House of Representatives, and whether he can exercise political control in the next budget that emanates from his administration.
All right, we thank you so much for your insights. That was political analyst Robin Garcia.
Meantime, mixed reactions have poured in after the Supreme Court ruled the impeachment complaint against Vice President Sara Duterte unconstitutional. In a statement, the VP's defense team welcomed the decision, calling it a reaffirmation of the Constitution and a validation of their long-standing position that the fourth impeachment complaint was
President and General Manager Jose Arnulfo Wick Veloso has defended the pension fund's 1.45 billion peso investment in Alternergy. This is after a 6-month preventive suspension from the Ombudsman. In a statement, Veloso said the suspension was based solely on an anonymous, unverified complaint and was issued before he could submit his counter-affidavit, which was filed on time. He insists the Alternergy deal underwent full evaluation and followed all GSIS rules, saying that board approval was not required as the amount fell below the 1.5 billion peso threshold. The suspended GSIS president maintains there was no mismanagement, stressing that the investment complied with all regulations and has already brought in nearly 118 million pesos in dividends. Veloso is among the 7 GSIS officials suspended over a 2023 investment, which the Ombudsman flagged for lack of board clearance and purchase of non-listed preferred shares.
We're pausing for another breather, but after that, more rainy days ahead for most of the country, even on July 28, when President Bongbong Marcos delivers his 4th State of the Nation address. Speaking of sauna, here's what you can expect on One News on that historic day.
The state of the nation is sound.
The campaign against illegal drugs continues, but it has taken on a new face. Effective today, all logos are banned. Dumating na po ang bagong Pilipinas.
What is the state of the nation according to President Bongbong Marcos? Gains, game plan, hits, misses. Sauna 2025, a One News special coverage. All-day coverage. Anchored by Ces Orenia Drilon and Regina Lay. Real-time reports on the ground. Anchors at large. Seasoned journalists' points of view. And in-depth analysis.
Mga minamahal kong kababayan.
This is the 4th State of the Nation address. Live coverage and analysis. Monday, July 28, 3 p.m. only on One News. All sides, all the time.
Welcome back to the big story. Emong further weakens as it begins to exit the country. From a typhoon, it quickly reduced to tropical storm status and is now over the coastal waters of Sabtang, Batanes. Signal number 3 and 4 have been lifted, but we still have signal number 2 over Batanes and Babuyan Islands, while Ilocos Norte, Apayao, and mainland Cagayan are under signal number 1. As Tropical Storm Emong quickly moves further northeastward, it is also rapidly dissolving as it enters the East China Sea. Still, Pag-asa continues to monitor the 2 cyclones outside Par, Francisco, formerly Dante, and the one with international name Crosa, which will both enhance the southwest monsoon or habagat. Habagat will be the dominant weather system during President Bongbong Marcos's SONA and will which may cause isolated rains over Metro Manila, Ilocos region, the Cordilleras, Zambales, Bataan, Cavite, and Batangas, as well as in Occidental Mindoro, Palawan, Western Visayas, and the Negros Island region.
And the much-hyped fistfight/boxing match between PNP Chief General Nicolas Torre and Davao City Acting Mayor Baste Duterte will likely not push through as scheduled this Sunday. In a report from National Bureau of Investigation Director Jaime Santiago, it seems that Baste Duterte has left the country for Singapore. This was disclosed to Santiago based on an immigration intel report. The acting Davao mayor is said to have left the country with his family and staff members. But before this, Baste's elder brother, Congressman Paulo Duterte, urged General Torre to sign a waiver before pushing through with the boxing match. The waiver, Duterte said, should absolve his younger brother of any legal liability should anything happen to either of them during the bout. Pulong Duterte also backs his brother's condition that all government officials must first undergo a hair follicle drug test before any boxing match takes place.
And before we say goodbye, our big picture for tonight is one that shows how love transcends all seasons. Jade Rick Verdillo and Jamaica Aguilar did not let bad weather dampen the mood on their wedding day. No pun intended. They went ahead and tied the knot on a very rainy Tuesday, July 22nd, even if it meant walking down a flooded aisle. The bride, Jamaica, rocked her white wedding dress and wedding train with floodwaters almost up to her knees. And guests did show up at the historic Baraswa Inn Church in Malolos, Bulacan. According to the groom, Jade, the wet wedding is just one of the many challenges they have to overcome as a couple. Well, congratulations and best wishes to the very, very brave Mr. and Mrs. Verdillo. Oh my God. Nightmare.
Wow.
White,
Nice.
mud. But you know,
Yeah.
she looked so happy.
Would you?
I guess kung grabe na yung ginastos mo, wala lang ang choice.
Okay,
Ang
sabi mo,
wedding
grabe
gown
yung
mo nga
fee.
will be so.
To be so.
Yeah, but then,
The church is beautiful.
Mm,
And
Baraswa Inn
I
Church.
salute them.
And you'll never forget it. It makes it that much more
Yeah.
memorable. Yung baha, yung wedding mo, baha. I mean, 50 years from now, they'll still be talking about it. at
Sana
their
walang
golden.
leptospirosis.
yun lang.
Yung giveaway, dapat doxycycline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, that made it to the Washington Post, is it? Or one of
This
the
is
foreign
not the first
newspapers?
It's not the
Also,
first time.
diba? I thought na it was a throwback.
Ah,
But then,
ganun ba?
Yeah, there was also a couple who got married na in Baja before.
Tsaka historic talaga yung Barasway Church.
Yeah.
But with how expensive weddings are these days.
Oo,
parang
baka may rebooking
itutuloy
fee.
na tuloy.
Push na yan, sis.
Oo nga. Correct.
Mahal.
Oo nga.
All right, and that's it for the big story this week. Thanks so much for watching.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
We have an all-day special coverage of the State of the Nation address on Monday, July 28. Do stay tuned to One News for that. And but for now, we wish you a safe and dry weekend. Have a good night, everyone.
Meanwhile, we do have coming up next, as per usual, we have play-by-play with Andre Felix and Cheska Leton Calao. Guys, uwi na ako. Hindi natuloy yung
Before
dapat.
anything,
Hey,
oo nga,
don't
before
go home
anything
yet.
else,
So sad.
hindi namin madala dyan, but happy birthday to
Thank you. Oo nga. Bukas pa, guys. Huwag niyo muna akong
Ay,
patandain.
wala naman tayo pasok bukas eh.
Salubong.
Ang dami kasi nangyari.
Happy
dun.
birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you. Sana yung cake ni Sean? Nandyan.
Alam mo, birthday wish ko lang matuloy yung box.
Yung match.
Wala na, sa Singapore na eh.
Sad, oo.
Wala, nasa Singapore na.
O, sa
Baka
Singapore
naman
na
pwede
lang.
mag-sparring lang si General Torre,
Tumakbo nga kanina eh. Oh.
Mag-mix na lang siya
mag-demo
doon.
lang siya or something.
Oo,
Speed
pwede,
bag,
pwede.
ganyan.
Sayang, inabangan. Ang dami
Next
nagawa.
setup na sila.
Ha?
Diba, ano were
Sa
there?
Rizal.
Ah,
Oo,
nandun na yung
nag-setup
parts nung
Pero,
ring.
ba't ganun? Wala
Oh.
man lang kaabog-abog, umalis na lang yung kalaban niya. Parang ganun lang.
Guys.
May condition din. Ewan ko, baka may kailangan puntahan sa Singapore. Baka ano.
So siguro, it's the onus is on play-by-play to provide us with all
Well, sabi ng mga netizens,
sports.
yung mga comments, baka daw natakot nung nakita daw yung videos ni General Torre.
training.
Nagkakaganon daw. Kinabahan daw. Sabi
Oo,
ko,
kasi kanina, nagja-jogging pa
Tapos,
sa...
jogging pa sa ulan.
Oo. Kondisyon. But anyway, have a great weekend.
Yes, but before
Oh,
you
go.
all
Sige.
head home for the weekend, again, happy birthday to Sean and happy anniversary
Uy!
to Pawi and Andre.
Oh my God! Magkano tayo? Same milestone din?
Yeah!
Ba, okay. Never ko na
Thank you dun ha. Nagaling ni Cheska dun ha.
Hindi ko naman
So, double
Ha?
celebration
Galing.
pala.
Kailangan natin tatlo magpapansin.
Oo nga, hindi. Kasi ano, wala pa kaming date. Hindi
Nagagalit
pa
na
kami
si Maria.
nagde-date. Oo, magde-date kami after this. Oh, go na daw, go na daw.
sobrang galit na si
Pagbigyan nyo na, minsan lang kami mag-anniversary, once a year lang eh. Pati si Sean, minsan lang mag-birthday, once a year.
Sana.
But thank you guys, thank you. And great show as always the whole week. Maraming salamat. Have a safe weekend. Stay safe, stay dry. And sayang wala tayong bonding session na match sana boxing on Sunday. Thank you to Cesar Lon, Sean Yao, Pauline Versosa, and The Big Story. On our show, nope, we don't have that boxing match
No, Tale of
in
the
the
Tape.
lineup. Nope.